L2 motivational self-system is another important theory to understand the motivation of second language learners, especially those related to English language. This theory was proposed by Zoltan Dornier, who has been a very important exponent of second language motivation theory in the recent world, and he has written extensively, starting with the late 80s and early 90s, and he's still writing on second language motivation theory. He introduced this system by incorporating mainstream psychology theories of self, and he meant at filling in some gaps in L2 motivation theory. For example, the concept of integrativeness, which believes, as I mentioned in the previous module as well, which believes in becoming similar to the native speakers of English language, which is practically impossible, and this desire does not exist in many second language contexts. So in this situation, the concept of integrativeness does not help us to understand or investigate the motivation of such second language learners. So what motivates them in this situation? Dornier came up with the idea that it is their own future self, their own desire to become a successful person, or they consider themselves as an honorable or successful person in future, and this very desire to look for a better future makes them learn a second language, especially when we talk about it in relation to English language, because English is considered to be a token of success in many post-colonial societies especially. You can see that in Pakistan, if you know this language, you've done a good degree in this language, or even if you want to do any good degree in Pakistan, you should be able to understand this language, because this is the medium of instruction. So this is a passport to success. So English inevitably an important part of our future successful self. So that's why Dornier said that it may not be people desire to become similar to native speakers which motivates them more, rather it is their desire to see themselves successful in future which makes them motivate to learn English language. In such situation, in order to fill in the gap in theory, he integrated the theories of self, and he developed a second language motivational self system. And this might explain students' desire to learn English language in many EFL contexts. It also incorporates students' L2 identity, which has always been an important component of L2 motivation theory, because how far a second language or foreign language poses threats or harmony to your identity, that has been a key question in learning a second language and theory moving about it. Let's now talk to the components of second language motivational self-system, and it consists of three important factors. The first one, and the most important one, which has been very popular recently, is the ideal L2 self. What we want to become, where and in what shape we would like ourselves to see in future. It portrays a range of qualities and aspirations one would like to own in future. It also underlines the L2 related image of one's ideal person. And this may be an important and influential factor if you are inspired by a person who is a good speaker of English. For example, it may be a movie star, it may be a politician, it may be a figure in the history. If he's a good speaker of English, according to some theorists, learners can learn language quickly, and they may be more motivated to learn the language. It relies on the desire to reduce the discrepancy between one's actual and imagined ideal self. If I want to see myself as a successful professional in future, where do I stand now and where that is placed? The gap between these two states is actually the basic motive behind learning something, because we strive to fill in that gap, we try to reduce that gap, and in those efforts of reducing that gap, we put more effort and energy into learning a second language. And that is the concept behind ideal L2 self as well, because we want to reach our ideal L2 self, and we see the gap between our real self. So we put energy and effort according to the gap. If the gap is wider, we might put more effort. If the gap is lesser, we might put lesser effort. But this identification of gap between a real and ideal self leads us to put more effort and make us more motivated to learn a second language. O2L2 self is another important concept, and this is similar to preventive instrumentality. This is based on fears and obligation one carries in life. If you are afraid of not becoming successful in future, and you think this might be because of not learning a second language, let's say for example English language, you might be, and in this situation you put more effort so that you may not fail in future, you might be motivated under your O2L2 self. And such self is extrinsic in nature, and this is also preventional, as I said. It incorporates those aspects of one's future self which are usually expected by others as well. So it also includes your obligations as well as expectations of others about you. If your parents want to see you successful, and you always have a fear that you might fail to meet your parents' expectation if you don't learn English language, you do not get a good job, you do not become successful what your parents want you to become. So you try not to let it happen. So in this situation, you might be motivated by your O2L2 self. The other important factor is L2 learning experience. The environment in which we learn something plays an important role, and the learning experience we have is always motivating or demotivating for us or for the learners who go through that experience. This involves immediate learning environment and the various factors which influence that environment. It could be teachers, curriculum, could be friends or classmates, and they make your experience better or worse. If you have a good experience, you are more motivated. And we have seen in some cases, as reported by various studies, that some motivated students may become demotivated if they have bad learning experiences. For example, they confront a teacher who is not willing to support him or her, or they might find a curriculum which is too tough for them and their level of learning. So a teacher should also look into the future self, and there is always a margin that you discuss with your students, that what would they like to become in future and what motivates them to become that. So in such situation, they would be able to understand their students' future selves, and they could relate such investigation with their learning process, and this could be very effective for producing better learners.